Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Law and Finance Show. And today we have another great guest on. Now, when it comes down to technology, a lot of times people are thinking that, hey, I can just, buy this software, pay for this software, and it's going to solve all my problems. But the truth is, if you don't have a plan around execution when it comes to your technology solutions, then you're probably not going to get the value that you expect. So today we have a great guest on who does that in helping people develop a actual well thought out plan for how they're going to use their technology to help them grow and manage their law firm. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Jay McAllister. Welcome to the show, Jay. How are you?
Hey, Terrell, doing well. Coming off after a warm, sunny Labor Day weekend here in Chicago, so you'll hear no complaints out of me, my friend.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I definitely want to, at the time we were filming this, this is, Tuesday, day after Labor Day. So tell us a little bit more. How did you spend your Labor Day?
Oh, it was great. I spent it doing the thing that I love the most, something that I've really started to do quite a bit more in the last couple of years, which is actually riding and competitive riding of my motorcycle on the racetrack. So I went out with a couple of friends and employees, which is always a nice mix when you can get those individuals together who both spectated and also rode. So a fun way to just kind of join forces with friends and just enjoy each other's company, warm weather. The rain kept away for the most part, so we just had a really enjoyable weekend just ripping around that racetrack.
Nice, nice. Now, I guess, how did you get into that?
Yeah, weird story around that, but basically what the moral of it is that when I turned 18 years old, I went skydiving with a friend of mine, actually a friend who's now an employee of mine as well. And we went skydiving, and it was just such a calming, rewarding experience. And it just I learned from that experience that most of the time our biggest fears, which at the time I had a fear of planes. I had actually never been on an airplane prior to that event. Got on an airplane for the first time and also jumped out of it in the same flight. So I don't know if that's, it was never really a bucket list item for me, but we did it. And, after that, I really craved a way to kind of get a sense of that sensation, that adrenaline, that the speed, and it really fell into motorcycling. And a couple years later after that, found out that there are these racetracks you can bring your motorcycle to. You'll be coached, you'll be shown the ways, and learn what they call racecraft, and it just gives me something to focus on and to progress and to just fine tune my skill set. And just the nuances in the sport is just something that's incredibly addictive for me. So that's really how I got into motorcycling.
Nice, nice. It's always one of those things when you see some people do different types of races. Like, I think like when I was in the gym this past weekend, I saw they had the stock car races on, and I've heard some people like, oh, that doesn't look too hard. You just sit in the car and you just go. I'm like, there's probably a lot more technique to it than just, and you probably find the same thing with a motorcycle. Like, there's probably a lot more technique than just getting on the motorcycle and hitting the throttle.
Yeah, I would tell you to have those people jump in the seat of that car or on that motorcycle, put them on a racetrack, and I think very quickly. I was one of the guys. I was like one of the fast guys on the street with all my street buddies. Like, I was like a fast guy, and I went to the racetrack and I was humbled immediately. That's where I learned what the fast guys really meant. And I was not even in near that caliber of riding. So like I said, gave me a target. It's like you see things that you didn't even realize was capable. The laws of physics seem to be broken somehow when you're seeing motorcycles go around corners at 100 miles an hour plus, knee dragging on the ground, and it just seems to defy physics when you see the motorcycle leaning over 50 degrees, lean angle, and it's such an incredible thing. But the mechanics of it are just kind of what fascinate me. I think there's a the inner child in me is just so perplexed and amazed at how all this comes together in this beautiful ballet of motors and speed and adrenaline, but also thoughtful planning, learning when to pass, when to hold back. It's such a cerebral sport. But but I would admit, yeah, absolutely. On the surface, it looks like it's pure chaos breaking loose on the track. It's couldn't be anything further from that.
And and I think that is such a great parallel for like the conversation that that I wanted to have about, because so many different law firms and just businesses, period, when they start to look at their technology stack, is they see a commercial like for law firms, a lot of them been seeing like Clio commercials, and they're like, oh, it looks cool, like Clio has all these benefits, let me just go get it, and then expecting it to just work on its own, where it's like, oh no, there's a little bit more technique and planning. So I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that. But before we jump into that, can you tell us a little bit about your background of how you got into the tech, helping companies with the technology solutions?
I've always been a tinkerer, just a very interested individual in just the mechanics of the universe. How does the world that we operate, the world that we live in, operate? I was just always curious. But I think the curiosity was just one part of the equation. But the second part was I had the motivation to explore those curiosities, as well as the ability. My parents always, growing up, were very supportive of my curiosity driven pursuits. So taking apart devices at home, and most of the time not successfully putting them back together, but still learning that all of these complex devices are really just a collection of more simple pieces can join together, creating a device that has a unique piece of functionality that each of those pieces individually could not accomplish on its own. So that always fascinated me. And I got into video gaming at a pretty early age. That led into some coding, just to learn how to create my own video games, and learning how to 3D model. That was actually one of my initial career paths. Was I thought being a video game creator, something in 3D modeling space, or coding video games, I thought was pretty cool. So I did that, pretty much throughout grammar school, high school, and really decided that when I was in high school, I was working for a technology company. I was a computer repair technician, and I met a guy who is a really good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Evan Galvin, and he ran a wireless internet service provider, a WISP as they call in that industry. So essentially, he's an internet provider. His focus was providing high-speed broadband to rural areas who didn't have access to have a cable line run to their home. And he came in the store one day. I resolved a computer issue for him, and he just he allowed me to look into at great detail the inner workings of his business. He brought me to his shop. I met some of his employees, worked on some marketing material with him, and he became somewhat of a mentor to me, until he eventually urged me, after a couple months of knowing him, to start my own business. He thought I had it in me to the skill set to be able to excel in business. And he thought, and along with his help, he thought he could help mentor me to teach me the operational side of things. The things where the skill set ends, where does the business acumen have to take over in order to have a viable business model? So I initially started off as a generalist of sorts, essentially working with businesses of all different kinds, from professional services to one of my clients is an ice cream parlor. I mean, just all over the board, just helping resolve their IT issues. And really, it was just a culmination of everything I had learned, as a kid growing up, tinkering. And it's like all of these issues that I had come across myself, I was able to apply that knowledge from learning from those items and apply those towards helping my clients. So that grew. And, about 5 years ago now, so I'm about going into my 9th year of business. So I guess this is after year 4, decided that, my client base, which at that time pretty much consisted mostly of professional service firms, I just interviewed all of my client base and realized that I had just developed such a nuanced perspective of some of the legal technology platforms out there that we had supported and implemented, that I wanted to dive in fully into that model and decide to support law firms exclusively.
Man, that is awesome. And that's one of the things that becomes a point of curiosity when I hear different people's story of, as you kind of did that survey of, what your, I guess you say, what your target audience would look like. How did you get comfortable accepting that? Because there are a lot of people who look and they may interview their client base, or they may think about their client base, and the data tells them law firms are your primary target, but it's like for them, it's just like they have some hesitation accepting that reality. How did that work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that it's a scary, action step to take, to decide that I'm going to devote all of my marketing efforts, my time allocation towards one particular vertical. I've met many great mentors over the years who have helped me to channel my energy where it's best served. I think that's one of the major roadblocks that prevents some entrepreneurs from really moving their companies ahead and scaling, is just allocating their time resource properly, because we only have 24 hours in one day, and you can only spend that time with a certain amount of activities. And so you've got to decide, how do you want to spend that time? And I realized that, the data spoke, the numbers don't lie. When I interview my clients, I ask, and this is a difficult question to ask, but I knew it was something that I needed to have answered. What is the unique value that I bring to the table? And the overwhelming answer was, you are helping us to navigate the technology field, knowing what platforms to choose, knowing how to implement them, knowing what hitches in the road or what friction points we may experience, so that we can anticipate and plan for those things. And that's the value you bring. Your response time is great, but that's not really your true value. Your true value is saving us time from having to research all these platforms and systems and bringing your expertise into the fold. So, I'll admit there was an element of rebellion in me that wanted to stick to, you almost have a tendency to make it a numbers game. Okay, well, if I decide to be a generalist, now my target market is 100 million businesses in the United States, rather than deciding that, if I decide to choose only law firms, in Chicago alone, there's 2,000 law firms. So I really just limit in the Chicago market. There's only 2,000 firms. Across the U.S., how many firms are in that? The kind of firms that we really specialize supporting in that 10 to 100 lawyer firms. Really, it's a much larger subset. However, bringing that unique value, that unique perspective, gains us. We're going to be more relevant to that smaller subset. So now it doesn't become a numbers game. Now you don't commoditize your services. It's more about bringing that unique value, which leads to that repeat business year after year, where you're not constantly worrying about churn rate of your clients, because your clients are in for the long haul, because they believe in you and they believe in the value that you bring to the table.
That's a very interesting point, because a friend of mine, well, several friends of mine, we had this conversation about, defining your niche and really focusing in. And, one of them recently posted something about, how just having this abundance mindset. And I was like, I used to have, I commented and told him that I used to have this abundance of mindset. And I think as I started focusing more on my niche, I realized that, the driver for having a very clear niche was really to protect myself from overload, because I realized there were more, like you said, there are 2,000 law firms just in Chicago, to where even when you focus on your niche, it's just like you'll realize there is more than enough business within that niche as well, to where it's just like niching down became like a filter for me, because then I started narrowing it down to like, okay, all right, what type of law firms, like which ones are the better ones? So as you think about that for yourself, like what are some of the problems that or some of the types of law firms that you tend to work better with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point that you bring up. I know it allows me to be more specific with, what kind of events am I attending? I mean, it just gives you so much focus, rather than going to an event where that it's not targeted towards a legal profession, or that you don't think there would be someone there who would be able to add value to any of your legal clients. That'd be an event that it probably would not be time well served. But if you're a generalist and you're just looking to get your name out there, you may attend that event and you may walk away from that event feeling like it was a waste of time or that you didn't get the value out of it because you didn't have that focus. So it allows me to be intentional about the people that I connect with, allows me to be intentional about the events that I attend. It allows me to be intentional about the marketing efforts and the message that we put out. We can be extremely targeted rather than trying to cast that wide net and saying, we can help your company with IT. We can be really specific and say, hey, we know you're a lawyer, maybe you're a sole practitioner, you have a trust account and your reconciliation process sucks. It takes you 3 hours every month. And did you know there's a tool that can allow you to do that 3-way reconciliation in a couple of clicks? Makes it easier on you, makes it easier on your accountant, helps you to focus on those high value strategic activities rather than being in the trenches. And did you know that little tidbit is just one area and there's 20 other areas where I can help your firm, all involving technology. Got a problem with collection? We'll help you there. So being able to be extremely targeted and focused on the messaging in all of the marketing outreach we put out there, we get less of those fraudulent clicks on our ads. I mean, the people who contact us, they typically have a really good idea of what we do and how we may fit into their firm. So, those are the kind of some of those problems that I've been seeing that our clients are coming to us, and we can anticipate those in our marketing efforts.
Awesome. You mentioned earlier about, just with the different technology solutions that are out there. So, and a lot of times what I find is, different lawyers are asking questions about, well, what should I use from this? And often they're just asking whether it's a peer who runs a similar firm or just someone that they know. And that person only has experience with one like software solution. So when people come to you, kind of, and let's say if they're asking about a law firm management system, like, how are you staying on top of like understanding the different systems? What are some of the pluses, minuses about different ones to know which one to recommend for them?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to they're all specific inputs that would be, required in order to be understood in order to decide which software platform would be the best. I mean, one of the just across the board, not in 2022, the thing that is a consistent theme that didn't used to be is that it should be a cloud-based software. If there are softwares out there that are cloud lookalikes, where they may run in a web browser, but it may run on it may be a piece of software that's installed to the individual's computer and connects to some type of cloud database. That's called a hybrid cloud software. Not really the best option because it's not optimized to be run through the internet. So a lot of times you deal with slow performance, may have errors that result as that software not being optimized. So it should always be a software that was developed by the cloud for the cloud from the onset. But there's a lot of decision trees that would be necessary to just determine which platform would be the best. What we found, initially, there were about 60 legal platforms, from practice management tools, like you mentioned before, Clio, Cosmolex, Zola Suite, Aderant, those kind of tools, e-discovery tools, Relativity, Disco, those kind of tools, litigation support tools. I mean, there's just so many document management tools. There's so many tools. There's about 60 that we were certified in. What I found over time is that really there are a handful that we found that work really well depending on the use case. So we've narrowed down that use case really to a couple, basically based on practice areas and size of firms. And we have about 4 to 5 options in those categories, depending on, we kind of have the solo practitioner firm, kind of that mid-space firm, which is at 10 to kind of 60, 70, and then 70 lawyers on up to about 200. There are about 4 to 5 platforms in each of those respective categories for practice management, e-discovery, litigation support tools that we recommend. And we do the ongoing training with them. We're enrolled in their partner programs. My staff, they continually do CLE certification through them. So that way we can be certified implementers and support specialists. So that when those law firms are looking into, okay, we need a new legal practice management system. Like we just helped a firm in Buffalo, New York, source a new practice management system. And we asked a series of about 60 to 70 questions to their entire staff, all centering around how their firm operates, how they collect revenue, how they generate pre-bills, how the attorneys approve those pre-bills, and all these different domains. And then we were able to take all of that information, and then synthesize that with our product knowledge of the platforms in the legal space. And we were able to deliver a really nice recommendation to them that is now being rolled out to the firm. Training has begun, and it's working out really well. But that's because of the fact that all of this planning and foresight was done on the front end. So that way, at each step of the game, we were able to tell them, hey, okay, this weekend, this is when we're going to perform the data migration. So make sure no one's entering new data from midnight on Friday to noon on Saturday. Just to, again, those small details are things that may seem small, but when you're rolling out a new platform to your firm, you have to make sure someone knows all the intimate details of what's involved from getting you to point A to point B. And that's really what we bring.
Awesome. I love it. Now, are there any general rules? I know you mentioned like the kind of the category, like the size of the firm. Are there any other general rules that you kind of look at to say, hey, if a firm is growing, like when do you outgrow maybe the prior solution? Like, are there any general factors that like, hey, this might be a sign that you probably should call Paradigm? I mean, to really understand, like, hey, have you outgrown your old system?
Yeah, really the kind of the deciding point there would be when you start to notice that operational friction. Either there are tasks that are overly redundant, multiple individuals needing to touch that task in order to complete it, losing visibility of where that particular task is at, what stage in the process is that particular activity at. When you find yourself needing to get up to speed on a particular matter, and it takes you 30 minutes just to find the supporting documents, notes, time entries, those kind of things. When you start noticing those operational inefficiencies rear their head, that's typically when you would know that it may be time to either optimize your existing systems or potentially choose a new platform that will better suit the operating model of your firm in the state that it is now versus when you initially implemented that solution. But it's one of those things that's, it's very intuitive. It's not something that it needs to, I never sell that idea that, okay, your firm is now hit a point of maximal inefficiency and you have to change platforms. Very intuitive to know, especially post-pandemic, not having visibility of where your staff is, what they're working on. You'll know that there's, what I typically call it is, you'll have a moment where you think to yourself, or maybe many of them where you think to yourself, there's got to be a better way to do this. And typically that's where you're just recognizing that lack of technology to enable you to operate like you would like to operate in that ideal state. So, and not necessarily being able to articulate what's wrong, but just knowing that there is something wrong. And, knowing that, especially in today's day and age, with how fast our economy, the world, business moves, your competing firms, they're going to be looking to leverage these technologies. So the firms who decide not to leverage the technologies will unfortunately be left behind, and it'll be very evident to their clients that they support, the vendors that they work with. Maybe they fall behind. The platform they're using is no longer compliant, with either, if they're in the insurance space or, in the financial space. So they'll run into these roadblocks. And that's really why you need a thoughtful plan and to put behind that execution.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And it's one of those things that I've seen even with working with law firms from a finance standpoint of just sometimes like trying to help them optimize the profitability does come down to like, are we getting the right information out of your systems? Because there have been a couple clients that I've had to work with in, I mean, we're building like massive workarounds in like Excel to where I'm just like, this might be a sign that there's a software solution that could be better, because you may not be as good with Excel that I am to build all these manual workarounds. So it's awesome to hear you say that. So if people are interested in finding you online, learning a little bit more about the company and, some of the things that you guys are doing, where's the best place for them to look for you online?
Yeah, so kind of two ways that we operate, and essentially those would depend on whichever item is in need would depend on the channel that they would want to contact us through. But and one way would be from a pure managed IT services perspective. You're just looking for someone to help you with planning strategy for the technology of your firm. Maybe you need some help with some day-to-day technical support. In that capacity, that's something we would handle. or on a, maybe your firm is just looking to implement a new technology, perform essentially a one-time project, and they'd like someone who's skilled, knowledgeable of the legal universe, but also the technology universe, and is able to marry those two skill sets together to bring the right solution. In either of those cases, I would recommend LinkedIn. Jay McAllister IT is my LinkedIn handle, or the website paragonus.com. Like I said, if it's more of a project basis, they can fill out we have a contact us form, and they can go ahead and fill that out, and they'll get in contact with us. We'll reach out and just find out where what the initial issue is, the core issue that's really presenting itself, so that way we can find out what solution would be necessary in order to solve for that.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Now, two questions, final question I want to ask before we wrap up. First one is, I see the instruments in the background. What's the story on the instruments?
Absolutely. So I'm actually, this is my, I'm now here in my basement, right? And this used to be just kind of my, the man cave where I just hang out. I've got my computer here. I, game, got my instruments behind me. Well, when the pandemic started and we all began this Zoom, meeting format that we're all so accustomed to now, I decided that I had a couple meetings that were rather bland, and there was almost a struggle to find commonalities and synergies to talk about. So I decided to move my Zoom recording studio down here, where I had all the things that I care about: my music, you'll see some cars behind me. I'm an avid Corvette fan and collector. And what it's done is, in a couple meetings that I was in, I connected with a couple lawyers, one who's in the technology space, a litigator, and one who's in the personal injury space. We actually formed a band. And then also another professional who's in the HR space. He plays electric guitar. We formed a band, so we've booked 5 or 6 gigs we performed at. And it wasn't. I'm a drummer. I've got my guitar here. This is kind of this is more so I'm in the introductory phases here, but as far as the drumming goes, avid drummer. So I've definitely did my part to try and hold the band together, give a nice backbeat to it, and we'll do anything from AC/DC to, we did some Frank Sinatra at a 1920s themed party, and hopefully more to come.
Awesome. I love it. I love it.
Well, if you got an instrument or a singing voice, we may be looking for a new addition to the
band. Well, I will say I will probably hold off on that because I want you guys to get more gigs. If I joined, I don't think we would be getting more gigs. I think we would be going the opposite direction.
Yeah. You got to know your talents, right? Know your skill set and know your weaknesses. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. So one final question before we wrap is, if you're talking to someone and say, hey, I was on the Law and Finance show with Terrell Turner, and when you listen to the conversation that Terrell and I had, hey, here are 2 big takeaways that I want you to have from that conversation. If you were talking to someone, what would your 2 big takeaways be?
One takeaway would be the riches are absolutely in the niches. Really defining your target audience, developing that focus, and creating a clear marketing strategy, as well as a business development and innovation strategy around that target audience, is key to scaling and key to really growing your brand and creating the efficiencies that you want. Second item is that there are many things out there that look like they are maybe easier than expected. Like we talked about the motorcycle racing before, or a particular software platform, or maybe you look at a profit and loss sheet and say, I know how to handle that. I know what the story that this tells. I know how to read the numbers. Really focusing on bringing those advisors and those experts into your realm who can help you to navigate those areas is key, especially when it comes to technology, because there are so many new vendors and platforms and applications that are being developed on a daily basis now. You have to make sure that you put together a well-thought, intentional plan to move your firm forward. And I think that's something that we do quite well.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Jay, thank you so much for being an amazing guest. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Likewise, Terrell. Looking forward to the next one.
If you're looking for ideas on how to manage and grow a profitable law firm, This Facebook group is perfect for you because every week we are featuring conversations with successful lawyers and businesses related to law firms on tips, ideas, and technology that are helping many people grow and manage a profitable law firm. So if you're looking for great tips and ideas, you definitely want to click the link below so you can join the conversation and be part of the Law Firms and Finance Facebook group.